All right, everyone, now we have to talk about Bernie Sanders, and he's been spam tweeting almost about, oh, I was against this war, I'm against all wars, constantly. And it's like, first and foremost, how fucking pathetic can it be? Like, he's got nothing else to run on, I guess. Being in a distant second place despite offering people all the free shit under the sun hasn't worked. So he decides that he's going to differentiate himself from, supposedly, the rest of the Dems. But Bernie Sanders, here's my problem with him. He's not actually a completely anti-war kind of dude. He's been in favor of the same kind of Obama-style world policing all along. In 2015, there was a clip of him where he straight out suggested that if he were the president, he was running at the time, he would continue essentially the same kind of programs that Obama was using. My question is this: other than the optics to the public, which is that if you're conducting the occasional drone strike, killing a person in a strategic strike, it looks different from marching 70, 100,000 people into a desert somewhere. Is it really less of an act of war, though? No, of course not. We're having a national debate right now over whether a dude who was literally running a bunch of terrorist militias should have been killed in a U.S. airstrike on the idea that, well, he fought ISIS, so he was kind of okay. Bernie Sanders has never been anti-war. He's just anti-overt war. And the other thing is, you've got to understand that because of his particular political beliefs, because he's a socialist, and it's still funny to see people try to explain how he's not when he uses that term proudly to describe himself. Social democrat, progressive, far left. I don't give a fuck what term you use. He calls himself a socialist. I'm just going to call him what he calls himself. I'll show him that respect that he's not due. Because of that, he's on board with Maduro and kind of North Korea, although not really, which is thankful, and then the Palestine stuff, as opposed to maybe other groups that are favored by people that tend to be more like a neocon or a neoliberal or whatever. But that doesn't mean he's not willing to drone people. Yeah, so he voted against the war in Iraq. He voted to fund it. Not in recent years, because Trump is president, of course. And he never raised the specter of anti-war sentiment when Obama was killing tens of thousands of people. I find that very telling, and he's not even a Democrat. And by the way, when people say, well, it was less warmongering than Bush, or there were less deaths going on, or just basically you didn't notice it as much because it was not reported on as widely. So, if you're going to be anti-war, you should be more or less a purist about being anti-war. You should say, hey, I oppose dicking around in these countries. Like me, for example. We shouldn't be in the Middle East. I have no problem with the military conducting itself. If the Pentagon says, well, there was an imminent attack because of Soleimani, so we took him out to disrupt the attack. I want proof before I believe that. But if that's the case, okay, you do you. But why are we there in the first place? Bernie Sanders never appeared to talk about this for the most part during the Obama administration. It's a big thing under Bush, disappears towards the end of the 2000s, basically stays disappeared for Obama's entirety of office. As soon as Trump becomes president, all of a sudden these people started having a problem with the same imperialistic executive authority they gave Bush. See, what happened is this. Here's my problem. And this is why it's pathetic. Sanders aside, because he largely sat it out on these things and abstained or voted against, which is to his credit, I will admit. The liberals sided with the Republicans, with the conservatives, again, we're using so-called terms here, in giving near-dictatorial military powers to the executive branch after 9/11. They were scared. They didn't want to be called unpatriotic by W, who at the time had high approval, so they gave Bush wide-reaching powers to conduct strikes and invasions and stuff without a declaration of war, which is always the way we had done things in the past, except in those cases where we fucked around and lost, like in Vietnam. In every war we ever declare, we do very, very well. We have carte blanche, we run the battlefield, we knock the shit out of our enemies. And all of these Raytheon-sponsored proxy wars and little incursions that we call conflicts, where tens or hundreds of thousands of people die anyway, I'm not sure how that's not a fucking war, it's a little bit different. The left sided with the right, gave Bush all of that power. Obama comes along. He takes that, he claims that he wants to close Gitmo and stop the war and all these things, and he never does. Yeah, he draws down troop levels in Iraq, but he sends a bunch back in a surge, on multiple occasions, I believe, keeps them in Afghanistan, drones a bunch of people. He kept the war going. The only thing that he changed is that he took a lot of troops off the battlefield and put more drones on it. Just as many people were dying, for the most part. Pentagon's own reporting said that 3/4 of the casualties of drone strikes were civilians. They had nothing to do with combat. That's a wonderful ratio. I wonder why there are so many people in that part of the world that hate us. Could it be because everyone knows a relative or a friend who got splattered by one of Obama's drones? Oh, I don't know. I think we need more research before we determine that. Now then, I've got a bone to pick with Trump on this. I think that he should just withdraw us from the Middle East. And it looks like Iraq might kick us out anyway. Fucking good riddance to the battlefield. We should remove ourselves. We shouldn't even wait for their vote. We should just leave today. We should say, you know what, fuck it. Let him have the embassy. Let him have the fucking embassy for what it's worth. Devolve back into a desert, which is what'll happen when people who don't like the U.S. come in and smash the government to pieces and ruin this state that we spend a while building up. We're going to cut our losses. Yeah, we wasted trillions of dollars. We're not going to waste trillions more. That's what we should do. I have a bone to pick with Trump about the fact that he hasn't drawn down, but generally speaking, he has continued the drawdown. He has scaled back our activities in most parts of the Middle East. Generally speaking, he has scaled back the warmongering. The idea that he sends a few extra thousand troops into this region is even really an inflammation when those troops were in there a couple years ago anyway. It's really just a restoration of what it was like early on in his tenure anyway, which had already been a smaller number. I oppose it. We shouldn't be doing it. It won't solve anything. It's just more endless bullshit war. But when Bernie Sanders comes in and pretends to be a peacenik, when he's not really suggesting any change other than, hey, I'm going to take more humans off the field and put more robots on the field. That's still an act of war. Does it matter whether you shoot somebody or blow them up with a drone, other than the latter's a lot more expensive and time-consuming and takes more technological finesse anyway? Bernie Sanders, in his own words, oh yeah, I'd probably continue to do what Obama's doing. I'm not comfortable with large-scale invasions. I'm comfortable with drones, though. Yeah, Predator drone kills somebody from several miles away. It's fine. It's out of sight, out of mind. I don't have to look at it personally. You know, hopefully there's nobody around to take a picture of the grisly body to use for propaganda. That's what Bernie Sanders wants. Anti-war. He's not anti-war. He's just anti-open war. He's anti-cowboy Bush-style war. Isn't everybody? Trump's not really in favor of that sort of thing. Look, he kills Soleimani. Did he send in a bunch of Navy SEALs to splatter him, festoon his intestines all over the ground? No, he killed him with a drone. Or a hypersonic missile from orbit, or whatever you want to choose to believe. He killed him that way. You know, you get one picture of the dead body. At least we got a picture of the dead body this time. We never got that with Osama or Baghdadi. I'm still waiting to see Baghdadi's mangled corpse. I'm still waiting to see Obama's mangled corpse before they unceremoniously dumped him in the ocean, which is a pile of bullshit steaming argument. By the way, I found it funny that a lot of these people, they didn't notice. There is one thing to be said for Trump's action here, which is it is basically an inverse of Benghazi. Yeah, that was blamed on a YouTube video. I had it uploaded at the time, the Innocence of Muslims video, the one that you can't even upload on the internet without it getting insta-blocked anywhere across the internet. The one that totally wasn't made as a CIA joke. The one that totally wasn't manufactured by U.S. Intel, despite the fact that it clearly was. Yeah, that's what caused it. You know, no, not really, but that was the excuse given at the time. Bernie Sanders is pathetic. Oh yeah, I'm voting against the Iraq War, but I'll fund it once it begins. Hey, you should have stood on principle and voted against war funding too in the initial funding battle. You shouldn't be in favor of drone warfare. It's the same thing. The idea that because it doesn't involve a physical U.S. soldier, a human being, well, it still involves a human being getting killed. How is that not an act of war? You're rambling. The Sanders sits there grandstanding. We must revoke Trump's ability to wage war with Iran without a declaration of war from the U.S. Congress. When did you say that when Obama was droning people? When Obama killed Osama bin Laden, supposedly. Did Bernie Sanders come out and say, well, this is a harmful escalation. This will inflame tensions with Afghanistan and Pakistan. It's a bad thing. We need to immediately draft a bill that prevents Trump from using Obama from using drone strikes on Osama anymore. No, he sat there and he clapped and said, oh, this is a wonderful day for America. One of our greatest enemies is finally gone. Why aren't you saying that for Soleimani? Because he's a Shia. That's really what this is about. It's about the Palestine issue for Bernie Sanders, ultimately. And he's thinking, I'm against war with Iran. I have no problem with Iran. Suleiman is easily replaceable. It doesn't really, it's, basically just a victory in name. The whole activity is basically overblown and a farce. But that being said, can we please aim criticism at Sanders and his people for literally the exact same farcical charade, which is exactly what it is? Bernie Sanders is not anti-war. He's anti-open war, and he's in favor of switching alliances, basically. He wants to align the U.S. with Maduro and probably would send pallets of cash to them. His fellow socialist. The Iranian regime, marginally, in the centralized sense, sort of similar. The Shia world under the umbrella of Russia. And I hate to use the Russia thing, but Russia's more centralized, more Eastern Bloc. Bernie Sanders vacationing in the USSR. Maybe he has some nostalgia. He doesn't realize that Putin's a capitalist. He basically is. He still thinks that the USSR can be restored. That's probably what he wants. He wants to go on more vacations and drink more fucking cheap, shitty bathtub vodka. That's about all. Peace out.